So it's like people would often call him a local werewolf of some kind. And then his wife would then complain to her friends that, my husband always comes up in the morning and he always has his pants pissed. And man, I don't know if that's a werewolf or just
or
just an alcoholic.
Right.
Yeah. Is that right? Yeah. Yep. Thank you very much. So good. If you don't mind me hitting the recording button right off, I am not a fan of long introduction and talks beforehand before we start. So that would be nice. Well, first of all, thank you very much for responding. I imagine it doesn't happen too often with you to receive a podcast invitation from totally no one. Does it?
Yes.
And by no one, I mean rather unknown.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, sure. Instead of introduction, I'd probably like to make it a little bit different. What would you say what was your objective of putting yourself out and getting exposure by podcasts and by making some, so to speak, public appearances? Why does it matter to you? Is it about getting your stories out? What would be the purpose of listing yourself?
Yeah, I just started. So I finished the second book in my series, which I'm thinking there's going to be, 4 or 5 or something. And the first two, well, the first one, definitely, I didn't even have an address. I mean, marketing was not going to happen for me at all. So after the second one, I'm a little more stable now. Stable being a very volatile word in my life, right. But I do have an address, and so it's just time to start, working on marketing. So this is, I have a couple of podcasts now. I've been featured in a magazine. That was like 2 months ago, I guess. So there's a couple of things that are happening that I'm just starting now to kind of push it, look into marketing, look into book signings and online presence and all that stuff. And how did the first book come about? Technically, I'm wondering, not having an address, I wonder how that even feels, to be honest. Yeah. Well, it's a travel series, so memoirs of what these 2 books are of my very long ago past, of probably 25 years ago or so. So I had been carrying around 7 journals with me for 25 years, just waiting for when that would happen. Not really, obviously, not in a rush. The stories are still the stories. They're not going to change. And when COVID hit over here, well, everywhere for that matter, I found myself with a lot of time. So that's when the book started. And in the remaining time, life changed pretty drastically. So my plan and my stability and my career all took a huge switch. And I found myself pretty much living in an RV on the side of a mountain with no communication to the outside world for quite a while. So I'm
when
back.
I said nice, I was hoping to hear something that all of a sudden a bit more time on your own, was a result of COVID hitting, but turns out it was quite the opposite, right? It took a quite negative turn.
Well, no, actually it was quite positive. I actually sold my house in a very high market, but my house was also my career too at the time. So it was a B&B, it was a catering kitchen, it was cooking classes, it was, doing all kinds of stuff. And when COVID hit, that all changed. So what seemed to be a pretty negative thing actually happened to be quite positive, because I love living remotely. So it was kind of I got married in that time. Me and my husband then kind of found ourselves flipping houses and on a raw piece of land, putting together a home site for our new home. And it was just kind of, so what seems like I was homeless was actually a choice, a very good choice on our part, that we found ourselves back in Colorado instead of the East Coast of the States, and able to focus on something completely different. That was not the plan, but it was actually really wonderful.
How does it feel living in a van?
It's not the first time. And I think most of it is, we love where we are. So the RV was kind of a step up from a van, which has happened for me before, but not my husband. So that was a difference for him. But we loved it because we love our property and we're outside all the time, and we're working on building our home site, and we're pretty remote, and just digging in the dirt and building sheds and greenhouses and getting the excavator out and the road situated and all that stuff kept us really busy. The only issue that really started to suck was when winter started hitting and it started getting cold. And at 8,000 feet, I'm sure being in Ukraine, it's probably about the same as what you guys have over there. So we disappeared for 4 months and went to Mexico. We were like, well, it's going to cost us the same amount to rent something here, and our main primary focus in working is to get this house site up and running, and you can't do that under 5 feet of snow. So we left and we went and traveled and put our backpacks on for 4 months, and it was actually fantastic.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
And how are those vans that are supposed to be heated, warmed?
They
Should
are.
there be some systems installed?
Yeah, they are, but living at 8,000 feet in Colorado, yeah, it's pushy. I wouldn't say it's warm.
Oh yeah, I imagine by all means. So was that prior or post that Alaska-Cuba trip? Was that famous trip your first big journey that you embarked on, or had that been any?
That wasn't necessarily my first big trip. Actually, the second book, The Bite of the Travel Bug, was my first big solo trip. So it was a couple of years after that. But it was kind of once again, it wasn't planned. It was just another one of those, I think I'll learn how to sail. I might have a fear of the ocean. Maybe I should get on a boat. And that was that. A lot of my endeavors have been very off the cuff, kind of, let's just do it and see what happens.
Have you tried to analyze kind of the nature of that sudden incentive almost to start on something terrifying? I think would be safe to say, right? Because I think, again, safe to say, a solo female traveler, I don't mean to objectify by no means, but I imagine that would imply certain dangers. So what inspired that in the first place, if you remember? The funny thing is, until I'm 52, my husband and I got married 2 years ago. It's the first time I've been married. Another one of those fear factor things for me. But I always knew that there was something inherently different about how I handled situations and fear specifically, as you said. For me, anything that has been a fear factor has been something that the way I deal with that, and have really always dealt with that, is to confront it. I have a really hard time letting fear rule my life or decisions that I make in my life. And it has taken me a long time to realize that is a very unusual way of going about fear. The interesting part of that is that back when I was 17 or 18 years old, I got hit by a car. At one summer, living at the shore, it was totally an accident. Ended up in the hospital, but at this point, they didn't really do a lot of medical scans on stuff in I guess that was the late 80s, early 90s. So I was kind of sent on my way, and turned out I had migraines for years after that, and they kind of slowly went away. But I had always joked about
just in a joking manner of like, wow, there's something really wrong with my head, because obviously I go through this fear thing in such a weird way. And when I met my now husband, he was like, I don't really think that that's a joke. I think that when you got hit by a car, something happened with, like, you don't live life normally. Like, that's not how people confront situations, you know? So really, here I am, 30 years later, like, oh, maybe there was something to that.
Some kind of impact may have happened.
Yeah.
Right? For the better or worse, what I'm imagining, for the better indeed. Right.
It's put me in some predicaments, but here I am. So,
you know, people, I think you have heard this opinion that certain people tend to use traveling as a way of escaping, and many of those get labeled escapists in a way. What's your take on people who claim that traveling is just another way of escaping your currents? You know,
I think that any action could be escapism on any level. It just depends on what your focus is. For me, I could definitely see how that could be easy, because it's easy to run away from things. But I also think that after doing it for a while, you realize that no matter how far you run, you still have to deal with yourself. I mean, you know, you could be sitting in the middle of a desert staring at a lion, having the same issues as you could in a city in a cubicle. Until you've done that, maybe you, it's a lot more interesting to be sitting in a desert looking at a lion.
Well, so when it comes to traveling, so your first book was written right after you had embarked on that Alaska. First of all, have you ever read that book, Into the Wild, I think it's called?
Yeah.
You might have read it. Yeah. What's your take on that book? Because that's a sad one indeed.
It is a sad one, and after living in Alaska for 8 years, it's kind of hard not to judge that, I think. And it's a really good book. It's very engaging. It's got a lot of adventure in it. A lot of the gypsy kind of lifestyle thing. But it also, after the movie came out and everything else, being an Alaskan resident, it was kind of dangerous, because it's just like anything else. When you mediatize something like that, then there's a whole bunch of people that all of a sudden want to go through the same experience. And it was not a smart decision on his part. I mean, I can't say that every decision I made was smart either. It made for a great story, very sad ending.
Eventually, right, if one makes out of that adventure.
But I think inevitable, kind of, for me and my background, to keep watching that was like, ultimately, something bad has come along, you know?
So you said that it wasn't the smartest decision, with which I surely agree. What do you think? I think that could be used as a good example of escaping his troubles in a sort of immature way. Do you think that was predominant reason why he set out on a journey like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think as any young adult at that age, right, you're trying to figure out life, you know, where you fit in this crazy world, and what makes you happy. Did your life ever resemble anything that he had to experience in Alaska particularly? I guess in certain ways. I guess I would have to say ultimately his demise was, I don't want to say ignorance in a bad way, but like his lack of knowledge about the situation that he was getting himself into. And I have definitely been there many times. I think all of us can relate to getting in over our heads, but I guess there's a line there that I have, like to say egotistically I knew better, but realistically my guardian angels were on overload for a long time. And kind of, you know, gave me lessons that I could learn without too many scars.
Luckily. So that Alaska-Cuba trip, rather journey, I would say, what is the highlight of the whole experience? I know it's challenging question appears to be to select something right, only one, right? But what would be a highlight, something that sticks out to you?
Learning how to sail. That was really my focus. That was what made me take off out of my little Alaskan cabin and out of my comfort zone, which I have been friendly reminded is not anyone else's comfort zone. But when I found the boat, it also, you know, as you said, it's very romanticized. Like, I want to learn how to sail. I'm going to get on a boat. And, you know, I got on with this South African captain and this woman that he met at the bar the night before. And it was cruisers. So it wasn't like the racing scene or, I mean, it very easily could have been romanticized. But the reality of being on the boat every day for months on a 44-foot boat with people that you don't necessarily know, and then you realize you don't necessarily like, is definitely not romantic.
And how did you act? Did it take you a relatively quick time to understand that you've got to act smart sometimes, perhaps preserve something that you would otherwise tell somebody for the sake of your safety, maybe? You know, how did your behavior change during that?
Oh, yeah. There were definitely times on that boat that I didn't think I'd make it back alive anywhere.
Really? Like what? Could you exemplify one?
Well, because we did 3-hour helm shifts, so we crossed over the straits from Cuba to Florida, to the Keys, once on the way there, once on the way back. And there were, along with just that crossover, there was also many times that we were under sail, that we would be moving in the boat for 17, 20 hours at a time, and you do helm shifts. So each one of us would have 3-hour helm shifts. So from Florida to Cuba, it was about 48 hours, I want to say, straight. And I did not know until I got on a boat that I have very bad seasickness constantly.
I was going to ask.
So we should have had a series of safety procedures that should have been followed, because each one of us was at the helm and alone above board for 3 hours at a time with no one in sight. And, you know, we should have been tied in. We should have had harnesses on. We should have done all of that stuff. And we didn't. And the whole time I was running for the rails, puking my guts up. So there were many, many times, and the seas were not nice. They were pretty rough. So it very easily could have, it only took one slip. And if you fall off the boat in the middle of the strait on a 3-hour helm shift and you don't wake anyone up for their turn, they don't know, you're gone. Like, that's it, you know? So
how many days it lasted, you said?
That was 48 hours straight to get from the Keys to Havana, to Cuba, where we actually stopped. And then back, it was about the same thing. It took a little bit less time, but still about 42 hours or something like that. Right. And just being sick the whole time. Oh God, I mean, there were definitely times. It was an adventure, and I would never change it for the world, and I have great memories, but it was also a living hell at times too.
Did you make any friends during that sail?
We did. I mean, the two people that I was on the boat with, obviously the captain and his girlfriend, I will call her, but she remained a good friend for years afterwards. Him and I did not so much, because we didn't get along so well, which we didn't find out until a couple of weeks after. We were on the boat together, stuck. But we did hook up with other cruisers, other sailors along the way that we met at different ports, at different anchorages. I can't say that I actually, maybe I talked to them a few times afterwards, but nothing long term, really. And what I did find out about the cruising world in the little context of the sailing world is cruisers are, they're big partiers. They're great to meet up with if you happen to cross paths. But for the most part, the reason that people are cruising on a sailboat by themselves is because they're running away from something.
Which means that they have been either traumatized or something is kind of inherently wrong with them.
They're not looking to make long-term friends. They're looking to party. They're looking to have fun. I'm not saying they're bad people, but a lot of the people that we met on their own boats, a very, very easy way of getting away from, as they say, the tax man or anything else, is to get on a boat, and nobody can find you.
Yeah, quite the opposite. They, I imagine, prefer to be kind of isolated purposely.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know if that speaks to a healthy mind necessarily always, you know, because I think the healthiest mind is the ability to adapt and realizing that, well, whether you like it or not, you're still a part of society, you know, and you've got to do something with it. Okay, interesting. And so what would you say, what's the second book about, remind me?
The second book is called Bite of the Travel Bug, and it actually is my travels previous to the Alaska to Cuba. And it's when my first solo international travel, first it was through Australia and then it was through Africa. So it was about a year of traveling, just backpacking. And
interesting, backpack in particular, which I imagine includes a lot of wilderness interactions of all kinds and sorts, right? Like animals and flora and fauna and all that thing. How did you prepare yourself prior to that one journey?
I did not. I was completely clueless.
How old were you, may I ask, at that point?
I was 24. My 24th birthday was in Australia, so halfway through that year. So
not even financially?
Well, what happened was I just wanted out. I wanted to go. I had done a bunch of traveling in the States, just road trips and stuff by myself. And I knew I wanted to go bigger. And I didn't really know where I wanted to go. So at the time, there really wasn't internet or any of that information available. So I had taken out my sister's World Atlas. That beautiful, big, heavy color, you know, full of different geographical locations kind of publication. And I just decided, okay, I'm just going to open it up, and whatever page I open it to is where I'm going to go. And it was Australia. So that's where I went. That was pretty much how I prepared myself. It wasn't, as I said, I wasn't the most intelligent of travelers.
Yeah. What was the first oh shit moment? You know what I mean? What was the first moment when you truly realized that it may have been a mistake?
Yeah. Well, it was, and the book starts off with me sitting on an Australian beach with all of my stuff on my back at sunrise, because that's when the plane had landed. And I thought that I would just go to a hostel, like get in a cab, go to a hostel, but it was like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't even think about that. So I just had this cab drop me off at a beach across from a hostel that I thought I would go to that night, and I just cried and cried and cried and thought, what the hell have I done?
And you were in Australia, you said, at that point, right?
Yeah, I knew no one there. I had just left a very long-term relationship, which is another part of the book as well, and was
another
just
part of the journey, and even
not a part of that journey.
No. Okay, but did that play a little part in making the decision, you think?
Not necessarily. That definitely comes into play later in the book. That's why I ended up going to Africa, because he was South African. So I did go to meet him after that. But the Australia part was not at all. It was just totally me just having wanderlust and needing to get out.
I'm asking is because, a breakup or another emotional event of often big magnitude sounds like something that could pretty possibly inspire a person's decision to embark on something that big.
I would say so.
For some kind of reasons, and whether we like it or not, breakups quite often serve a reason for an intelligent or otherwise decision. So
or otherwise, yes. No, but I did. I did have to talk myself out of it, pick myself up off that beach, and it's funny. It's all in perspective, right? I mean, the fear that you have as a traveler in a foreign country by yourself, is completely unknown to you until you're in that situation, because otherwise it's completely romanticized. Here I am sitting on this beautiful beach outside of Sydney Harbor, watching the sunrise. I mean, it's gorgeous, it's warm, it's safe, you know, my external anyway, all of this stuff. But my internal was just screaming like, there is
What's
no
next?
safety zone here whatsoever. Where that was just my perspective.
And I think that speaks to the fact how often it is unbelievably important to learn to ride the wave. You know, it's like in a moment of chaos, the very next important step is just to make that step. You know, it's like I had to remind myself I used to run relatively long distances, and I kept reminding myself about the next step. All we need to do is just the next step. So what was that next important step after finding yourself stranded almost at that beach? What did you do next?
I went to the hostel, and I quickly found, which I knew in the States too, hostels are, especially for a 23-year-old single female, kind of a lifeline. You know, it's where, I don't know so much anymore, but definitely at that point, that's where all young people go who are traveling, especially backpacking, because in the States, we don't do that. You know, we don't take the obligatory 1 year off after college to go travel and find the world and see what we like. Like, we're supposed to go to work. Like, we're supposed to be
Us
real
as
and
well.
have a family
that's what we do
and, you know,
here as
settle
well.
down. And so it was kind of an anomaly for me being an American traveling by myself, especially. And it soon became a joke because, as everyone else in the world is well aware, Americans don't have a great reputation for being nice people when they're traveling.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So it kind of became like I took on the duty of being mascot of, like, you know, not all Americans are jerks, you know, and rightfully so. I mean, when you come across those people when you're traveling, you're like, oh, come on, you're giving us a terrible name. Like, just go home. But I did. I picked myself up. I made a bunch of friends. I partied a lot, and just started having some pretty amazing experiences, especially
Any psychedelics during that time? May I ask a bit of an off question? I know it's not directly connected to that, but
not while I was traveling. I think I did. I mean, besides, you know, smoking pot, I didn't really partake in a lot of stuff while I was on my own. And a big part, not because I wasn't interested in it or I hadn't done it, definitely had my phase, but there's a trust factor when you're traveling by yourself that I didn't feel safe or comfortable in not being in control of my situation.
Oh yeah,
So-
yeah, which in your condition served a big part, right?
Yeah, and there is a
As
part
much
in the book
control
that
as possible.
I go into about that. There wasn't any psychedelics involved, but there was a group of us at a bar one night, and it was all outside, and there were picnic tables, and people were partying, getting drunk, and there was this one girl that jumped up on a table and started dancing on a table, and she fell, and she hit her head on the brick patio as she fell. And there was probably 150 people outside on this patio, and 2 people went to help her, and everybody else ran away. And it was not, I mean, I think she turned out okay. There was an ambulance that came and took her away and all of that stuff. But as a single female traveler, that was kind of, like I say, I took that as my gift, as my lesson of, I need to be careful. Like, yeah, this is a big party and I could get as crazy as I want to, but I don't have anyone to watch my back. So, and really at that point, I mean, there were no cell phones, there wasn't social media, nobody knew where I was. Half the time I didn't know where I was, you know? So it kind of, you know, those little instances that I was lucky enough to partake of and learn from, I did. So while I was traveling by myself, there was no psychedelics involved.
Okay, well, fair enough. Yeah, sure. For
Yeah.
the sake of
But I
safety,
totally, I
obviously.
do. I mean, in normal life in my home back in the States, that was kind of part of life for a long time. And I really believe that expanding my neurological pathways by doing that kind of stuff allowed me a lot more freedom in the choices that I made when I was traveling. And I don't know how else to scientifically say that. You know, I think it just changes the way that you look at things.
You know, there must be a little bit of a mysterious element to all those experiences, which is beautiful.
Kind of that magical element.
Yeah, and well, so I'm asking partially because I'm personally quite interested in that, and I don't think I've ever recorded any of those 30 plus episodes without one time asking a guest about his or her psychedelics experience. But also I feel like it's pretty tightly intertwined with being close to the nature and so-called witchcraft, green witchcraft, or whatever you name it, right, which we'll later get into. So I think that's almost an integral part of it. And how did you go about the logistics of your backpacking journey? Did you have to use only cars that picked you up, right? Did you
I
even
did
buy tickets?
a little bit of everything. So when I first got there, it was the normal, get a cab, find a tour bus, you know, a lot of ride shares through hostels and stuff like that. And over the months, it became more free flowing. Like, okay, we're just going to hitchhike. You know, like I can't find any of that stuff to the places I want to go to. Like, namely Tasmania was one of them. At the end of my trip, I spent a couple of weeks in Tasmania, which was absolutely incredible, talking about like wilderness and nature experiences. But it's not like you could get a tour. Like that didn't exist to the places that I went to. So there were quite a few hitchhiking stories, and that was my first. In the States, it's, at the time anyway, even more so now, but as a young female, you don't hitchhike alone. Like no, you just don't.
Oh, that sounds like a recipe for horror.
These people are crazy, you know, like, you just don't do that. But when you're traveling, you have backpack on and you're in these odd areas, it's almost like, you know, my intuition got really sharp when I started traveling by myself. And
those senses got really on point.
Yeah, I can't say that happens normally because I travel with a couple of people that were like, wow, I can't believe you're still alive. Like, what are you doing? You know? So once again, I think it's just a matter of taking those lessons and turning them into a learning opportunity when you're in places like that you wouldn't normally see when you're at home, when you're in a safety zone. So,
do you believe that every single person needs lessons of those kind, or is it not just, it's just not for somebody?
I would say yes to that, but then again, now after, many more decades of life, I also think there's certain people that just shouldn't leave home.
Yes,
that shouldn't ever do psychedelics and should. I hate to say that because they're very few and far between, but I have met them. Yes, but in general, I think that it helps if you're a person that is into kind of expanding your horizons and pushing yourself to your limits and testing yourself. You definitely.
But the problem is that a lot of people appear to believe that they are them, but in reality it proves to be different.
And from what I've seen, the internet and social media has changed that so much. I don't say it's all bad because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it weren't for that. But in a sense of solo traveling with a backpack on in the wilderness, social media has changed. Yeah, it's changed a lot of not only how those places are affected, but like what kind of people end up there. I don't think there's a lot of realistic
type of people.
Yeah, like there's this kind of otherworldly expectation of something that you see on a screen as compared to something that you experience in reality.
Are you of an opinion that the nature is caring and kind or unforgiving?
Oh, that totally depends. It can be both. I mean, I would say that my sailing experience, in the article that the magazine just did on me, one of my quotes that I came up with was something along the lines of the sea is a fickle lover. She tempts you with her magic and mystery, and then pummels you with seasickness and just fury and something so simple like that. Or I mean, sitting and staring at a pride of lions from a safety zone is a completely different experience than being right in front of them.
I'd love to get into that, and I am. We are getting into that.
Yeah. It's it could be both.
Right. Yeah. When you were sailing, were there any storms? Did you experience any real severe, drastic nature conditions? Let's say.
The seas were terrible, but there wasn't necessary. The very first time I put a sail up was outside of Fort Lauderdale. We had been there's a little canal that goes inside the inland of Florida called the Intercoastal Waterway, which you can take from pretty much the tip of North Carolina all the way down to the Keys almost, and not ever go out into the ocean. So I had done that for a couple of weeks on other boats. I'd been on a boat and living on a boat, but we had been on the Intercoastal Waterway, so I never had a chance to actually sail. And when I finally did, it was what seemed to me at the time, I'm sure it wasn't huge, like a bad storm or anything, but it was a storm, and it was blowing and it was raining, and the seas were really heavy for what my first experience was. But yeah, I was scared out of my mind. I thought, I am so in over my head. What am I doing? Like, one wave and I'm done. Like, really. On the other side of that, as in with any traveler, I think anyone will tell you, the closer you get to death, the more you feel alive. And it almost becomes an addiction to some people because it's such an extreme, like you get this rush and this crazy fear and all of these hormones pumping in your body.
I think it's purely physiological.
Yeah.
Often, I believe, right?
It's and then you make it out alive and you're like, oh my God, like almost I'll do anything to get that feeling again. It's almost euphoric.
Oh yeah, I imagine that. I am pretty critical of those roofers. I'm sure you know who those are, like those dummies that go up super high and then they hang by their pinky or something like that. Right. But then sometimes I think, man, like, it appears pretty reckless, but then who the hell knows what their experience is?
Right.
Who the hell knows what kind of trick that body and brain plays in them?
And I think that there's a very real difference between someone who is aware of what those responsibilities and repercussions are when they make those decisions, to someone who sees some stupid video online that wants to get a lot of clicks, they
all do it for clout.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that's like, after living in Alaska for years, there's a lot of money spent on finding, going out and finding idiots that get themselves into trouble. And, it's...
Alaska's monetizing it.
Yeah. And they don't, municipalities and governments and societies and communities shouldn't have to pay for your stupidity. It's one thing if you go out and do it because you're aware of what you're doing and you know that rush that you're going to get, and you're not expecting anyone to save you if the shit hits the fan.
Right.
Or you just don't know what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. What's Africa like?
Oh, it's exactly like that. It's exactly all of it. It's, it's absolutely gorgeous. And Africa was never a place that was on my list. I went because of a guy, and it didn't work out. And I stayed instead of running home. And it was, I will go as far as saying it was probably the best, most amazing 4 months of my life. And I have traveled a lot after that. But it was just so extreme that the emotions were so palpable. Like every new instance, every new adventure that I went on was just untouchable. Like it just reached all new heights. And it was exactly that, whether it happened to be with the people of Africa and the extremeness in poverty and happiness, which they are one and the same in Africa. It's really amazing. It's not like anything you would ever experience in the States. Poverty there is just kind of life, you know? And people are so joyful, and they're so happy, and they're walking 4 miles for water so their children don't die. Like, how is that even possible, you know? But there were so many instances with the people there that just renewed whatever hope I had for humanity, which I don't have a lot. But then the wilderness, of course, the animals, the geography, everything was just, it's just so alive. Everything's so extreme, you know? Everything's so on the edge there. It was really an amazing time. I really had a lot of amazing adventures.
Was there any moment during being in Africa that you experienced some kind of a hint of amenities? Did you ever, being in any of those African places, feel a little bit of, I don't want to say civilization, but a little bit of comfort that would remotely remind you of what you used to have? I'm trying to ask, how comfortable does it get in some place in Africa?
You know, there is one of those mind-altering aha moments that I have written about, and it was I was on a bus, a little tour bus that I had taken instead of a regular bus this time around, and there were locals on it too, which was kind of weird because there's a very big delineation between those kind of transportation options. But I had planned on getting off at a stop along the coast, and when we got there, I was just, I'm a single white female traveling alone through Africa with a backpack, you know, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know anything about Africa. I'm just out for the pleasure ride. And we pull up, and it was just about dusk, and I was like, I can't get off this bus. Like, if I get off this bus, this is a bad ending, you know? And I don't, obviously, it's black versus white there. I'm putting this in terms of in my head, right? Because that's what I see. Because that's what's so obvious is the color of your skin. But it wasn't so much fear. It was intuition. It was more like, you know what? If you were these people, you would feel the same way. What my ancestors and my color has done to you for generations, you know, is evident in me sitting here in this bus right now. And I have to be really aware of where my safety is, not because these people are bad people, but because they're human. And because if anyone is treated that way for that amount of time by a certain race of people, you're gonna feel hatred, animosity, like that. You're not human if you don't want to backlash against that. And that really, for me, through my life, I have said that experience has taught me that if every single one of us, especially the white people in this world, knew what it felt to be a minority, knew how uncomfortable it felt to be in that position, we would be living in a different world. And I think it's imperative that everybody has that feeling, that everybody has that experience. But we work really hard in our society to never feel that way, you know? it's not okay to feel that way, where I think it's absolutely necessary. I guess it depends on what you want the outcome to be. But that was my take on that.
So how does, in your opinion, an average white person can, for the sake of almost education, expose himself, herself to this multitude of, I guess, the situation? Because, you know, I don't know if it would be a fair estimation, but a lot of, let me call them white. Let's say, you know, a lot of us, a lot of white people, we don't, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, we don't tend to think about that, don't tend to relate to that situation. Would you say that exposing yourself to those predominant, like, black cultures would be one way of doing it? Or, you know, yeah. I'm asking a very complex question, but I think you know what I mean.
I think there's a lot of ways to do it, but I think everything about our society and the way that we're raised and what we're taught and our belief systems tells us to never do that. Like, that is the one thing that we're not allowed to understand. And this is where I think, as traveling has given me this understanding that I have ultimate privilege, because I am a white woman that was raised in the States. I didn't know that until I went somewhere else and saw what other people had. And I think that feeling, that understanding, that experience is in direct opposition of what we're told we should do. And that's why I think it's so important. You know, like, even people that I know that travel a lot, most of them, they do tours, they go to fancy hotels, they go to all-inclusives. They don't go to see the culture of where they're going. They go so that they can feed their ego and get drunk by the pool, you know? People pay a lot of money so that they can go and get drunk by the pool and be waited on by those locals. And that, to me, is the epitome of not understanding. I don't want to say travel, because that's why they're traveling, but like, why I've traveled, you know, what I get out of it, and how important I think it is that you put yourself, everyone puts themselves, not unnecessarily, not unsafely, not, you know, recklessly, but like, find situations that make you uncomfortable, that make you vulnerable, and then figure out why, you know, like, what
yeah, why is the most important question.
Yeah, like, why does that make you does it make you uncomfortable because you're actually in danger, or because you've been taught these ideas that aren't true? You know, like, it's really good to question why you have these thought patterns, because we can't change them, and we can't change the world if we don't do that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I completely and utterly agree. Okay, so first I'd like to ask you about the craziest human encounter that you've had, and then I'd slowly ease into craziest, maybe animal encounter. And I'm sure
animal encounters are like, I have lots of them. Human encounters.
Yeah, like during a hitchhike, you know, running into somebody odd.
Yeah, you know, there are two that stand out in my mind, and both of them in Africa. One is not so much a person to person, but it's definitely a human encounter. And that was, before I went hitchhiking on my own, I was on an overland truck that kind of, so they take a lot of people and charge a ton of money coming down from London to Cape Town. And then with an empty truck, they have to go back up. So they have all these spaces that they basically go to hostels and sell for cheap, because they have to fill them up. And so there was probably 10 of us on this overland truck that we had all signed up for cheap travel, pretty much. And we would drive all day, and the drivers would find places for us to camp at night. So we had our tents, and we would all cook together and stuff. But they knew where the safety zones were. And one of these places that we camped, one of the first nights that we were on the truck, everybody's kind of dispersed. We pull into this, it's not a site, it's just a place on the side of the road in the bush. And everybody sets up their tents, so you don't really, I couldn't tell where we were at the time until the morning.
How many people are we talking? I'm sorry.
There were 10 of us, and then the two drivers. So not a big group. And we still had our own little tents, you know, like I was carrying my tent, so we weren't using any of their stuff. And in the morning I woke up, and I was kind of like in that dream state of like, I don't know if I'm sleeping or I'm awake or what's going on, but all I could hear was drums. And it was the most amazing experience because I kind of woke up to these drums that were somewhere out there nearby, and I didn't know what was going on. And then the story behind that is that we were in tribal land, and every morning they welcome the sun into the sky through drumming. So every morning they drum. That's their good morning to the sun. And it was just so, it was something about that human existence that was like, wow, people still have reverence somewhere, you know? I mean, maybe not me and my people in my world, but they're here, they're out there. And that gives me, like, it was just an amazing experience.
A reminder.
And then, on the opposite side of that, there was one point where a couple of us that I was traveling with stopped. It was in Dar es Salaam, which is up on the coast, on the west coast, on the other side of Zanzibar, Tanzania. And we had stopped for a night before we could get the boat across. And we didn't have a reservation anywhere, and we couldn't find a hostel. And we're walking around this city that has millions of people in it, you know, and all of us with our white faces and our backpacks are like just targets. And we finally find this place, and the local black manager guy who's showing us these rooms. It's not always that you get a bathroom with the room that you're renting in Africa. Depends on where you are. And their bathroom situations are not fantastic, to say the least. Which is like a whole chapter in the book. But he was showing us the room, which was whatever. It was a cheap little room for our sleeping bags to be rolled out in. And we asked if there was a bathroom. So he went to show us the bathroom, which was basically planks into this little hut over, you know, raw sewage in the back alley. And all of us were kind of, you know, trying to not show our disgust, but obviously that's what was coming out. And this guy, to his credit, I mean, he just kind of went off on us, you know? He was like, you whites, you come here and you want everything, and you look down on us. And it was just this, like, how dare you judge
the generational trauma came out.
And basically said, you know, I came from a tribe out in the bush, and I was lured in by all of your promises. You, meaning the white man, you know, you promise everything. Everything's going to be wonderful and beautiful, and there's money, and it's the land of gold. And I had to leave my tribe. And when we leave our tribes, we can't go back. Like, you either stay or you go. They're not going to keep you if you want to go, but they're not going to welcome you back either. And now I'm screwed. This is my job. I'm lucky enough to have a job, and I'm the manager of this establishment that you think is so disgusting, you know? And it was just really, I mean, something that I definitely needed to hear, because I didn't know that. I mean, it's not me that's doing that, obviously, but like, our society just promises these empty things with money and material goods, and we're destroying ways of life that have been going on forever, you know? So that was one of those instances for me that was very, you know, it needed to happen. It was necessary for me to get what he was saying, and yet not nice, you know? Not a nice existence for him or for our reality.
Reality is not nice quite often.
Like, you're right. I'm like white dirt. I'm sorry. You know, like, I don't know what to do to make amends. It's not, you know, not a nice reality.
I'm trying, because, you know, my objective now is to quite often play the devil's advocate sometimes. I think you would agree that it's not often the case. Rather, not often, but not always the case, you know. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, sometimes, do you think that sometimes certain people or certain groups of people maybe try to victimize themselves on purpose? I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You know, sometimes that tends to happen.
I think, you know, I think we all do. even rich white people, especially, maybe. But there's a very fine line between racism and prejudice, you know, in that kind of term of what we know as racism, like the Black Lives Matter movement. Like there's this, I have a really close friend who is not racist by any means. She's the most evolved human being I know on this planet, but she can't stand that kind of stuff because her whole opinion is, I've never met, so like, I can't stand that white people need to appease their guilt by trying to help in that manner, you know? Like, it's not the black people, like, ask them if they're being oppressed, you know? I don't want to see a white person with a Black Lives Matter thing. Like, I know that you think that that's helpful, but, so we've had all these really interesting conversations about that, and it's kind of the same thing of, you know, this poor guy, right? I mean, he left his tribe, and it's kind of my fault. But at the same time, you did, like, there is a bottom line of personal responsibility there.
Sure,
when you left your tribe, you know,
yes,
like,
can't be excluded.
You have to now deal with that decision. I didn't make that decision for you.
Yes,
so
yes.
I think that all of us can look at those. It's different perspectives of every choice that we make, you know. If you're going to take personal responsibility for those choices, it allows you the freedom to keep moving on. It doesn't mean that you haven't been oppressed in some way. It just means that that's not what you choose to focus on, I guess.
Nothing is lopsided as it may first appear, right? So
there's no black and white to that answer, really. Everything is very situational and personal.
Unlike animal encounters, I imagine, those situations probably...
Oh, they're very black and white.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, so which of those stand out to you? You know, any couple of particular crazy interactions?
There are definitely a few. I would say the first one that comes to mind is I was in Lake Malawi in Africa, and at this kind of backpackers hostel or something, they had a float, like one of those dock floats that you could swim out to, and a bunch of us had swam out and were just kind of hanging on the float, and one by one people just left and would swim back to shore, which, you know, was a pretty good distance. And I look up at one point and I'm like, oh, I'm the last one on the float. Like, okay, no big deal. I sit out there for a couple more minutes, and then I realize, like, I kind of look around a little, take my, you know, my bearings, and I realize that there's a hippo not far off that's coming for the float.
Are they aggressive? Like, do they attack?
They're actually one of the top killers in Africa. They're super aggressive.
I wonder how many people end up being killed by those. There must be some
I mean, like, oh God, what a horrible death. But that's pretty much what was going through my mind at that point was, like, I sat there for a while and I'm like, well, I don't want to jump in the water because I know that thing's faster than me, but if I sit here, I'm really screwed. So it was just one of those, in my mind, I look like one of those cartoon characters, you know, like by the time I finally decided to jump in the water, I had to really frickin' move, you know, like I didn't have an option here. And I must have been swimming on top of the water because I was just, my adrenaline was like, I'm going to die, you know.
Was it far from the coast?
It wasn't, it actually was going for the float, and it was trying to climb up on the float after I left. Like, it didn't know I was there, but like, I would have been in a really bad situation if I stayed
and
there.
You had to swim to some kind of a nearby coast, right? Faster than it did. And how far was it from the float to the coast?
I don't know. It was probably less than
humanly
half a
possible,
mile.
let's say.
You know, it was definitely, I mean, we were out there having fun and stuff, so on a regular recreational kind of day, that's just what people did.
Man,
but
just imagine if that son of a bitch had gone after you.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely...
Are they fast?
You know,
they look kind of chunky, you know?
You know, it's funny because they're super fast underwater, and you wouldn't think so because they're just fat, like they're round. but they actually run, like they choose these areas that they run underwater, like they sink and they're actually running on the bottom of the lake. So their feet are touching the bottom of the water, but that's what makes them go so fast. So when they disappear is when you really have to watch out, because that's when they're running underwater. Yeah. It's so that was a little, that was like, whoa, I need, once again, this was a lesson that I came out on the other side of.
The kind of on the land, do they come out of water?
They do. Yep. Yeah. But they like being in the water. But then it would
have been easier kind of probably to run away. I don't think a hippo is faster.
Yeah, I think with most things like that, I know they tell you with water buffaloes and with alligators, and I think hippos are the same thing. Rhinos are the same way. If you run zigzag, they can't run that fast. Really? Like they can't keep their eye on you. They can't
maneuver, right?
Yeah. So if you're running from something, like our initial response, like our,
just straight.
Our instinct is just to run like hell straight, but they'll catch up to you in a heartbeat that way. Like you have to really retrain your brain to like, I'm going to run zigzag like I'm drunk or something.
Doing a bit of a dance with those bastards, right?
Yeah. Shit, wow. Who can outsmart the other one? Yeah. And when you're dealing with creatures like that, you don't... your brain doesn't like catch into like quick think mode. You're totally on instinct. Like, what the hell do I do now?
And do you think do you think it's even possible to kill a hippo?
Not by yourself. No. I mean, I'd need some pretty heavy ammunition to do that. Yeah. They're pretty big.
You're gonna need a little army or something, right?
Right. And all my backup had already swam to shore. I was like, thanks, guys. Once again,
I've never faced with a hippo, but I think, probably sooner or later there comes this almost peaceful moment when you realize, well, shit, it's like it's gonna be at most painful, unbearably gory death, but at the same time, what a way to go,
It'll be pretty quick, and you leave a legacy behind. I mean, one hell of a story is your last hurrah.
Yeah. If there's even a story like that, if you get discovered. Right. Man, so many stories just never get told.
That's the good thing about like being able to tell them again is like, like when somebody asks you, how'd you break your arm? You're like, okay, I got to come up with a really good one here. It can't be like, well, I tripped down the stairs, right?
I got a similar story. I due to my clumsiness, a couple of years ago ended up slashing half of my back with a nail. And now there appears to be a kind of a scar on my back. And whenever somebody asks me, I say, I always say that I could at least come up with a rather heroic, interesting story.
Right.
Not because I got my bathroom temperature so unbearably hot that I fainted and then slashed my back due to my stupidity. So many brave hearts, they just never get known. So many brave hearts ended up in a hippo's stomach, I bet. Right.
Hippos or water buffaloes or crocodile, like all of those things, pretty amazing. But
you must have seen a lot of gators, a lot of alligators. Did you see a lot of them?
I did see them, but I was more inland. I was,
that's good.
I was on Lake Malawi, but that was just a couple of days. I was more like I did the Ngorongoro crater, which is up in Tanzania. It's on the border of Kenya and Tanzania. And then that was kind of my answer. I couldn't get through the border to go to Kenya to go to the Sahara, so or the Serengeti. So I had to take, the next best thing, which was the crater, and that was incredible too.
Inland has its own beauty, I bet. So to speak, right in face of danger. So lions, you said, observing a pack of lions. It's not a pack,
so lions.
Is it a pack of lions?
It's a pride. Yeah.
Pride, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. What was that like?
So that was an up close and personal experience that was a surprise. So once again, we were on the overland truck, and I had a lovely intestinal issue going that week because I had left out some of my food and then eaten it. So my stomach was nasty, and there was no bathroom on the truck. So there was a couple of days there where every time I would just bash on the front of the truck for them to stop every time I needed to go, and then they'd stop wherever they thought it was safe, and I'd run into the bushes with my toilet paper. And one of these times, I don't even know, because I bashed on the front of the truck so many times, the truck just stopped. And it was dark out, but I was like, oh, this is my opportunity. Like, I guess that was for me. I got to go. So I grabbed my trusty little toilet paper and I head for the back of the truck. And as I'm like halfway down the ladder, I can't see anything because it's dark. And I hear the driver yell out the front window, like, don't get out. Like, we're just keep your hands in the truck. Like, don't get out of the truck. We're just stopped for a minute, you know? And I'm kind of like, I'm hanging out on the back of this ladder, like, I gotta go? Do I make a break? I don't know what we're stopped for, you know? So I don't know what's going on.
Puking all over the place.
So, so I
no
kind of
ramps
like, I like lean around the outside of the truck from the ladder. I'm like holding onto the ladder and I'm like, all right, I'll just peek and see what's there. Right. And I lean out and all I see are these like eyes coming at me, you know, like just like little yellow eyes, and there's a lot of them and they're all headed towards me, and I'm like, oh my God, like I was up that ladder just like, okay, whatever it is, I'll just have to wait. And
I bet your stomach will fix pretty quick, right?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm fine, I'm good. Yeah. But all 10 of us, like, there were canvas roll downs, and we're kind of up higher because we're in an overland truck. So we were pretty safe. I mean, if they wanted to, they could have jumped up. But he said, we were just driving down the road and it was night. So he came across this pride of lions that was sleeping in the middle of the road because it was still warm. Like, they had gone out on the hunt and they were taking a rest, and the truck woke them up. So they circled the truck, and they circled the truck for like 15 minutes. And they were staring at us and we were staring at them, and it was like, they were absolutely beautiful, like the most beautiful animals I'd ever seen. And they were just as interested in us, you know, just because it was surprise. They were like, oh, what's this thing? Like, what are you guys doing here? You know, we were the same way. So it was very cool. It was very fortunate close encounter that we were really, really lucky to be a part of.
And the truck was stopped, right? It wasn't cruising around and none of the team attacked, luckily, right?
No. They obviously, we were not feasible dinner, I guess, which was okay with us.
Well, they say that if a lion is fat, that means that he won't attack. Yeah, I don't know.
And realistically,
maybe for sport, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing if you're like walking around in the bush by yourself at night. It's another thing if you're 10 people in a truck. You know, like they're not. Yeah. They're not.
If I was a lion, I would attack just because of annoyance, I guess. You know, how dare you humans?
Yeah. No, what I found in all of these travels, and especially in like being in Alaska too, is that for me anyway, wildlife has a series of rules. You know, like there's understanding of what wildlife expects and how it's going to act if you understand where you are and the animal that you're dealing with, where humans don't. Like, humans just don't make sense. They're just crazy, you know? Like, if you run upon a bear in the wilderness and you know the rules and you know that bear, like, you have a really good chance of not getting hurt. Whereas if you run across some methed out guy in a alleyway, you're just screwed.
You ain't gonna drop on the ground pretending that you're dead.
So
do you think that's true what they say, if you want to make out of a bear encounter alive, that you've got to drop on the ground and pretend you're dead? Is that true? Do you know?
It depends on if it's a black bear or a brown bear. It depends on if there's cubs around and there's not. I think in general that statement is true if you're being attacked. Like, if the bear has already decided it's coming after you, don't fight back. Like, you're just better if you play dead, which is the last thing on earth you're gonna do, right?
Hell
like,
yeah, absolutely. Oh man, how much courage does it even take, bravery, from a person
to not fight back,
and then hearing that big ass animal sniffing you.
Oh man, and if you've ever been with grizzly bears, they are enormous. Like, I've been in the presence of grizzly bears in the wild that are upwards of 1,600 pounds. 1,600 pounds. They're enormous. Yeah. Yeah, it's not instinctual.
That's why I've always said that bullshit they showed in The Revenant. I don't know if you've seen that film with DiCaprio when he fights a bear. Man, I don't know how realistic that shit is. My man took down a goddamn bear. There must have been a grizzly or black bear.
Jeez, crazy. Yep, they are enormous. And you don't want to piss him
I'm happy
off,
that my boy
that's for
Leonardo
sure.
won Oscar for that. I mean,
that was an incredible movie. Like, the pain. Oh, yes.
yeah, that's crazy.
So, are you in Ukraine? Are you out in the wilderness, or?
Well, I don't know. You know, the whole Ukraine is kind of wilderness now, to be
compared
honest,
to what we're used to, anyway.
Yeah, but I live in a town. We don't got a lot of wild animals here. We get foxes, rabbits. I think that's about it. Oh, well, time to time we get some wildest people escaping some hospitals in the forest. I live around the
That's
forest.
the craziest.
That may get pretty wild at times, but those are taken care of quite quickly. So yeah, that's it. That would be it. I have always wanted to live in a vicinity with wolves, to be honest, because back from where my mother is from and my grandmother was from, my grandma used to tell me those crazy stories about wolves attacking people's homesteads, and I don't know, that woman has told me some crazy stories, and now as I've grown up, I've become more and more skeptical of some of the shit that she said.
She had great stories though.
Oh man, those stories. She used to tell me about those werewolves. I think she was the original source of where I got this fascination with werewolves instilled in me, because she said, and maybe that correlates with green witchcraft. I don't know, maybe you could draw some parallels, but she said, she would often tell me those stories about one of her neighbors, an old guy who also happened to be an alcoholic, let me put it mildly. And she said, in all seriousness, she said that he would go, she was young at that point, but she said, I had noticed him go into the end of the yard, and then there was this brink of a forest, and all of a sudden he would come behind a tree, and then from behind the tree all of a sudden a wolf would come out. So it's like people would often call him a local werewolf of some kind, and then his wife would then complain to her friends that, my husband always comes up in the morning and he always has his pants pissed. And man, I don't know if that's a werewolf or just an alcoholic.
Right.
Yeah, but that was the wildest stories. But yeah, but the wolves, they would jump on top of those sheds where people keep their chickens and geese and dogs, and those wolves, they would try to undo the roof of the shed.
Right. Well, it's like a buffet in there.
Yeah. But I always terrified me because that spoke to their intelligence. It wasn't just like animal instinct, These motherfuckers, they learned that, for us to get to the chickens, we got to go through so that was the craziest thing. I was like, no way, a wolf would jump on top of but it always attracted me. And I think that's another thing about nature being romantic, I'm aware that we shouldn't romanticize the nature, but still I've all my life dreamed about living next to a wolf, because it would add this kind of danger element. I don't think I could ever. That's why I never left Ukraine since the war started, because I'm privileged living in danger. I know it sounds pretty stupid and reckless, but it's exactly the presence of a threat, whether it's a drone or a goddamn wolf that wants to get to your ass.
Right.
That adds the value to my life. That's what I truly appreciate.
It's kind of that living on the edge thing.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, so that's beautiful. So that's what it is. No,
wilderness, the nature is definitely something that I can't be without. I'm definitely much happier, being on my mountainside. I go into town, and our town here is 20,000 people. Like, it's not.
Hell away. 20,000. That's a lot. My town's got like 3,000 on a good day.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's good.
Weekend,
Yeah.
Yeah,
so we try to not go see many people. We've got some friends up here on the hill, but I can't. People are crazy. This world is nuts. You're living in it. I can't imagine what your daily existence has to be like, but it's all that power and greed just destroy any kind of decency that we could have on a bigger scale.
And I think it occurs quite often in a moment when people distance themselves from the nature. Quite often in life, one might find himself so tangled and confused, and the answer is always in the nature. It might take a little bit of effort to find that answer, but at the end of the day, it's always in the nature. Whenever you're next to a river, in the mountains, in the forest, that's where you feel the best. No bullshit exists.
Well, and something really interesting that I just learned when we were in Mexico for the winter 2 years ago, we did a lot of those nature walks and tours and stuff in places that we could, and spoke to some old native Mayans that were down there. And I didn't know that in nature, now this is across the board. I mean, some of the stuff that we heard of down there was specifics, because it's their trees and their plants down there that we were looking at. But in nature, as a rule of thumb, if you get sick or something poison, like they were saying, the tree, one of the trees that we were looking at was like poison ivy. You know, it would give you a rash on your hands if you touched it, just even the tree trunk. And you wouldn't know that unless it happened to you. But in general, they said, if this happens and you get this rash on your hand, look around you, because within 5 feet is the antidote.
Wow.
But you don't know what it is, right? So like they know, because they've done this stuff already. They're like, okay, well, this tree, what's going to cure the rash from this tree is this plant. It grows right at the base of the tree.
Wow.
And nature is very symbiotic like that. So if you look at, you know, medically stuff that's going to fix anything, you have to look at the source, because nature already has it figured out. So we're so unevolved in our ego that we think that we know everything. And it's something as simple as that. Like nature has it. It's right there. Just look. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, indeed. Well, last but not least, witchcraft. Let's get into that. I'm excited to hear what green witchcraft means for you. What is it really?
So witchcraft for me, you know, the term witch comes with a lot of definitions, emotions. I feel like for me, witchcraft is about being natural, is about that kind of stuff, is about looking to nature and in the cycles of nature and in the moon and in the stars, not only in the plants, but it's all there. Like we're supposed to be in this natural kind of full circle thing as part of this earth, but instead we've kind of grown into this cancer instead, because we keep working against it. And for me, witchcraft is exactly that, is just having not only the knowledge of all of these things, but like just having reverence and awe about the answers that are out there. If you just look, you know, like lately I've been looking at, we have a big transformer outside of our house that I'm always looking at going, that can't be good. You know, like there's a lot of EMFs coming off of that thing, and I don't want our bedroom to be on that side of the house. But there are stones, and of course there's companies out there that sell this stuff, but there are natural stones that are repellent of EMFs, you know, and stuff like that. Like nature always gives you an answer, even to our synthetic made up crap like EMFs, you know, like there's an answer for it that is not synthetic. So that kind of stuff, and just knowing cycles of the moon and mental and physical cycles, and you know, they all kind of go.
So it's almost
hand
like a
in hand.
biohacking, and that is one term that gets thrown around also left and right. Mostly like cracking the nature code and using it for yourself. Have you used it? Have you applied those knowledges with particular purpose? How have you practiced anything like that?
Yeah, and I think that that's become definitely a lifestyle. Instead of, there's so much to know, right? I mean, I can't say that I've even gotten the tip of the iceberg, but there's so much knowledge, there's so much information out there that you can incorporate that I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. So little by little, it doesn't become this, oh, I should use this or I should use that. Like, that's just how you live, you know? We have always had a greenhouse of some sort, and now that we're building our own stuff, we're using mostly as much as we can from the land. Like the greenhouse that we built last year is dug into the earth, so it's more we actually grow in it all year up here. So last year we got back, we had built the greenhouse. There were still seeds and stuff in there when we left. We left for like when we went to Mexico. And we got back in March, I guess it was March, came back up on the hill. There's still 5 feet of snow here. We had to snowshoe up to go check things out and open the door to the greenhouse. And there are greens in the beds. And it was because we have a living roof that we built on top of the greenhouse. So the snow every day was melting little by little and dripping into the beds. And because we had dug it into the earth, it was warm enough So here we are, we have to snowshoe, you know, all the way up to 8,000 feet to go see how everything is. And we have spinach growing in our greenhouse. Like, it was such a proud moment for me. I was like, oh my God, I'm amazing. I'm brilliant. I didn't even know it, right? Like, this wasn't the plan. But that, to me, like, even though that doesn't seem like witchcraft, right? But it is. Like, that's listening to and living in accordance with what's around you and your surroundings. It always has the answers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Are you a little bit, let's say, skeptical in terms of people needing and urging, yearning for a city? You know, you probably run into people like that. Do you think it's...
Yeah.
That's my reaction. You know?
I'm like, every once in a while I do. I mean, you know, it's nice to go to visit Denver or New York and go see a show or something. But for me, I think it's the draw of the social aspect of things. You know, like, we are community-oriented beings, even though, you know, there's a very big part of me that's ashamed to be a human being because of what we become. I'm still a human being, and I love the idea of community. The only thing is there's people involved. Like, you know, like we do need social interaction. It's just the kind and form that I don't really think we get what we're looking for on a lot of layers. But that's what I think the city thing is. It's like, you know, for a while it's just this energy, like this excitement, and everything's
for so long, only
busy
for so long,
and
right?
yeah.
Yeah, when I think about people residing and trying to get to a city, like, I don't even know who's a reclusive now, because quite often people that yearn for a village, they're considered to be some kind of reclusive, you know, who try to escape.
Finding your tribe and all that.
Yeah, but then I think, I don't know which one. I feel it's safe to say that a city is a natural continuation of evolution, of development. We need to build, we need to explore, we need to improve, we need to expand and enlarge, but at the same time, what could be more of an evolutionary continuation than kind of... I feel like it's everything's in cycles, and quite often people just return to where we started at, you know, and it's all.
And I think also on another level of what's happening worldwide now after COVID is that a lot of our cities here anyway are emptied out because everybody can work from home now.
And
you know?
I think that speaks something to what is really an efficient way of living. It's only in a moment when a turbulence begins that people understand that it's not a very sustainable way of living in this pack.
Well, and the issue with that is that we are intelligent enough to know how to make cities sustainable. I mean, honestly, it's not really that difficult if we just built that way and we had that focus. But our focus is on money and not on longevity.
Proper values.
I will say, yeah. So when you screw that up, you know, I mean, if the shit really is going to hit the fan, the city is a bad place to be. I mean, most people have no idea.
It's a cage, right?
How to grow or where their water comes from, or like, it's pretty amazing to talk to city people because, you know, we're thought of as kind of, you know, the weird mountain people, but I don't know if I could live not knowing where my water comes from. It's just so basic anymore for me. There's an ignorance in it that's almost bliss for them, I think.
Well, they say ignorance is bliss sometimes. That's what they say.
Well, I guess if you're ignorant, yeah, it's blissful.
Yes. Well, that's been a lovely conversation. I feel like I could have prepared a little bit more, so pardon if we haven't touched upon something very meaningful and important. And you mentioned that you're in the... Thank you too. You are in the process of writing the third one, right? And you say you would like to publish 4 of them. Where can those 10 listeners of my podcast discover your literature?
Well, I am, of course, on Amazon, and I also have my website, which is lisaruoff.com, Ruoff. And both of my books are available on Amazon as well. And the third one hopefully will be out in a year. Well,
give us a little tease of what's the third about. And
so the third one is about my 8 years in Alaska. So how I got there, my experiences there. I was living off grid in a little cabin, no water, no heat, no, you know. I was a sea kayak guide for a while. I started my first restaurant up there. So more of instead of a travel memoir, it's more of like the wilderness living memoir. Yeah.
And the fourth, is there any?
So the one after that, which I've kind of been playing around with, I also, after all of these things, spent about 25 years as a chef. So I have owned restaurants. I've put them together as a female chef in the restaurant world. Nice. That would be those stories.
I've been also going to, and I don't know, I've been wrestling whether I need to ask this question or not, because, you know, knowing your intimacy with the nature, I don't know if I would be correct to assume that you're into vegan lifestyle, or maybe quite the opposite, you know, because the meat eating lifestyle.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, actually, because as a chef, I have found, for me personally, I have been a vegetarian for a very long time. I think I was like 20 years old or something when I decided to not eat meat. And I do eat fish, and my personal reason for that is if I can't kill it, I don't have the right to eat it. And I have never been able to kill a cow, or I came pretty close with a chicken at one point because of my businesses, and I was struggling with that, with serving people chicken when I wouldn't eat it. But I still couldn't kill a chicken. So actually, one of my restaurants, the bigger one, did go vegetarian because I was like, I just can't, for my own personal reasons, I can't do it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a good explanation. It's probably the best explanation I've ever heard, to be honest. But
I also think there's a lot of people out there that really enjoy hunting and can do that. The last time I ate meat, I was in Alaska. I was probably 24, 25 years old, and we had snowshoed out to a cabin for Thanksgiving, and someone had killed a caribou for Thanksgiving dinner. And I was like, well, I mean, they killed it. It was out here. It was done really respectfully. It's Thanksgiving, you know, like, so I ate. It was so good, and I ate like 4 pieces, and I was so sick.
Wow.
And because I hadn't eaten meat in like 5 years, so my body didn't have the enzymes to break it down, and I totally overdid it. And then I had to hike 6 miles out, being sick, and that was it. I never did it again.
Right. And when you say that you do not eat that which you can't kill, do you, when you say you can't kill it, do you imply you've never practically killed it, or you wouldn't even be able to potentially kill it?
I have never practically killed it.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I have played around with the idea of eating chicken again, just because I'm 50 and the whole collagen thing, blah, blah, and I just can't, you know, I eat fish, and that's just as far as I can go. I have killed many fish in my lifetime, and you know, enjoy fishing? It's just, I mean, being in Alaska, halibut and salmon were like always in abundance. And fishing for salmon off of the back of my kayak was always a favorite of mine. So yeah, not so much here because everything's polluted here really anymore. Yeah. So
sure. Thank you very much, Lisa. That's been nothing but pleasure.
Yes, thanks. It's been great, and I mean, we've been talking a long time, so